of National Yoga Day 2022. I am Bindu Kuti, the Dean Basic Sciences, NIMHANS. Today we have a very unique and a very special personality, a visionary with us, Dr. Balasubramaniam, fondly known as Balu, a widely respected development activist, leadership trainer, thinker, and writer. It gives me great pleasure, sir, to welcome you on behalf of NIMHANS and invite you to deliver this talk on Karma Yoga and its importance in building state capacity. And before you start your talk, I request Dr. Ravindra to formally introduce the speaker to the audience. So thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Over to Dr. Ravindra.
Good afternoon for all of you. So I feel very greatly humbled and pleasure to introduce Dr. Balasubramaniam. In fact, Dr. Balasubramaniam's life and legacy was a great inspiration for all of us during our college days, where we used to listen a lot about his life dedication for the development and the upgradation of the tribal community in the HT Kote area of Mysore. So his 4 important principles in which he really ventured to for the health and the social development of this tribal community was immediately after his MBBS from Mysore Medical College, and being inspired by Swami Vivekananda's philosophy and the 4 major principles, Ahimsa, Satya, Seva, and Tyaga. He himself dedicated his life for the social upliftment. So this whole journey has, and his experience has culminated he to be a leadership trainer, a thinker, and a writer of par excellence, and also being the visiting professor at the Cornell University and IIT Delhi, where he teaches the courses on leadership and human development. Along with MBBS, he also has hospital administration and health system management from BITS Pilani, and a master's in public administration from Harvard Kennedy School. His vast experience has made the today's establishment for him to give a very major role to draft as the steps to be taken for the capacity building for all the government service people of our country as a full-time member of Human Resource and Capacity Building Commission at the Government of India. And he has a number of books to his credit, and which can be looked into in his website, drbalu.com. So, and other most important aspect with Dr. Balasubramaniam is he's a very inspiring talk, and he has inspired many youths, and where he developed and nurtured a Vivekananda Youth Movement, where today under the Vivekananda Youth Movement organization, the lot of activities has been carried out throughout the country, especially for the people with less people who are very much in needy, with the rural and the tribal community. So with this very brief background, I know it's very, very hard to give it in a capsule of his 36 years of his whole life and rich experience. But with this very brief introduction, I welcome Dr. Balasubramaniam to enlighten us about this topic.
Thank you, Dr. Ravindra and Dr. Bindu Kuti, for having me over, inviting me to share some thoughts on something both fascinating, essential, and there's no part of my, if you can call it that, my professional existence today. Before getting into the topic of the day is actually very specific to what I'm doing. It's about the role of, how does Karma Yoga fit into in building state capacity? And state capacity, as we understand it, is the ability of the state to deliver on its obligations to citizens in various spaces, whether it is protecting citizens, whether it's welfare of citizens, whether it is protecting the sovereignty of the nation. We need capacity for everything. And from the context of Karma Yoga, how does it play out? So I just thought, let me share and start off from my own experiences. And my experiences have been, like Ravindra explained, I started my life of living and working in the forest with indigenous tribal communities. And it's possibly the best period of my life, both in terms of sense of satisfaction that I derived and the enormous learning that I gained from communities and community wisdom. And so I see what I'm doing today and the energy and foundational understanding of my own work, what I require for my work today comes from those experiences. So I thought I'll just speak about that and start off from how it all began. Living and working with tribals was the first time I got exposed to government. Now, most of us in our own ways, we talk of government in abstraction. For us, government is a little idea, something out there. And we are all very, government is like cricket for us. In India, everybody is an expert on cricket. When there's a cricket match happening, we have an explanation how the batsman could have played better, the bowler could have bowled better, the fielder could have fielded better. It is as though we are there on the ground and we are sort of telling them what to do, and if they don't do it, they're useless. Government is also like that. We all have an opinion of government. We expect government to perform and behave in a particular way. And when they don't, we say government is useless. So I was no different. And my journey began, our understanding of government is very simple. As a young student, those things have thankfully changed now under the current government. When you want to go, even a Xerox copy of your marks card is invalid if you don't have a gazetted officer signing on it and putting a seal. So I still remember taking all my marks card before joining for my MBBS course to a gazetted officer. All the Xerox copies used to put a signature and seal and give it to me. And I never really knew what is a gazetted officer. I never knew what is it to be gazetted. And those days you never knew what a gazette was. But for us, government just meant that much. And then getting into a government medical college, even then I never understood what does a government medical college mean. I only thought if the government is running it, it's a government medical college. Today, if you look at NIMANS, though it's in every sense of the word, it's an autonomous institution, one of possibly India's best institutions today. It's still a government institution. It's a public institution funded by the government of India. But we don't see, we don't really every day feel government in NIMANS. So what exactly is government is something which I never appreciated as a young student, because neither in the college I felt something that the overwhelming presence of government, nor the little experience I had about my getting my gazetted officer signature on my marks card copy never made me really, to me it was very distant. And that's how government is. It's a very distant animal. It's a faceless animal, and it is somewhere out there. We need it. It's like oxygen in the air around us. Without oxygen, we'll die. And oxygen is ubiquitous. It's everywhere for us in the atmosphere outside. Government is something similar. It is there everywhere. We all need government. We can't do without government. We withdraw government, only then we'll understand what it is to be without government. My understanding was as limited to that, and most of us would be like that. But when I went into the tribal area for the first time and understood that government, by virtue of being the government, was exercising its obligation of being a protector, being a provider of welfare, and expressing its concern through various interventions that it was doing for citizens, not just issuing caste certificate to my indigenous tribal young boys and girls who went there for higher education, but also saying that the forest you live in does not belong to you, it is national. You have to leave the forest. So bringing in laws which sometimes people don't understand, and the tribals never understood most of the laws that was applicable to them. It started troubling me and saying, how can there be a government or a system which is expected to be a protector and a welfare provider, not really take the voices of the people for whom you're making those laws into consideration. So my understanding of government took a very negative appreciation of the role of government. That's a limited way. It was an experience at some point of time. None of this is valid today, but I'm just saying it for some point of time. So I started looking at government as somebody whose the expectation people had was they'll build homes for tribals, they'll give them cattle, they'll take care of their livelihood, and if they don't do that, government is failing. At the same time, it was fascinating to me that on one side, people living happily in the forest by a government law were thrown out of the forest, and therefore poverty was created in them. And the government comes in again and says, now that you are poor, I'll take care of your poverty. So I was confused by this contradiction. I make them poor first, call them poor next, and then say I'll elevate your poverty third. So I was thinking, is this what government is? So my understanding of state and its capacity was, it evolved into a confused appreciation of what the state is. So I'm saying all this because most of us have a very different understanding of how states and state capacities evolve. Interaction with government, I saw several extraordinary officers when I started meeting and seeing them as living and working with indigenous tribal communities. When I started engaging with the state, and that is when the state took a form in my mind, an amorphous form. It could be represented by the deputy commissioner in the district or the secretary of tribal affairs ministry in government of India, but there was a form to it, and that form was represented by an individual representing the state or the government. So for me, my understanding of state suddenly started moving from a faceless, heartless entity to somebody who could be spoken to, communicated with through an agent called the government employee. So for me, my appreciation evolved on one level to getting personalized and personified through the public servant. For example, if you look at NIMANS today, it's a government hospital, but the personification is represented by the director of NIMANS and his entire team. So similarly, at different levels, there are different people. And so the state took a more clearer form for me. Even then, state capacity was not something I focused on. It was taken for granted that state will have capacity. So my interactions, when I started meeting people, some extraordinary people, I still remember the early days of my going there. A young deputy commissioner who was responsible for taking me there. Mr. Paligar is his name. He's now long retired, an extraordinary human being who had a heart in the right place. He would come into regularly visit us in Kote, and I still remember one incident where he would come and sit in there's a particular law, again the state, called the PTCL Act, Prevention or Transfer of Certain Categories of Land. That's what it says. That means if I'm belonging to the marginalized segment of society, or if I'm a Dalit or a tribal, and government has granted me land to help me improve my economic livelihoods, and that land is taken away by somebody else instead of I being the owner and user of the land, the government can step in. Even if it is officially sold, it can step in, take back that land and give it back to the person. So he cannot transfer or alienate that land. So it is, the case is called SPT or PTCL case. And so this is very important because the poor, when they are burdened with poverty and the marriage in the family, somebody is sick, they go pledge their land, they can't get it back. The land gets taken away by the money lender, and the state can step in. And that's the role of the state, the protector. And what Mr. Paligar would do was these cases are heard in his court. The deputy commissioner of the district in Karnataka, as many of you know, for me, he's the face of the government. He's also the district magistrate. He used to not listen to these cases in Mysore because he would say these poor people have to come from different parts of the district. And that time it was unified Mysore, which is a big district. to my office, spending so much of money, and how long it will take, and whether they'll be able to go back, I don't know. And he would come with his entire paraphernalia of officers down to the last person down the line with the police superintendent and the police officers, listen to the cases in the middle of nowhere, where the land is to be located, where I used to also go with a lot of cases of these people. And I asked him, sir, is this legal? Because in our mind, the government is a building, the building in which a government office operates. He said something very important, interesting to me. He said, the act says I am the magistrate. It does not say where I should operate from. It does not say I must be sitting in my office to be the magistrate. So I am a magistrate, I can sit in the forest, I can sit under a tree and do. And he would actually run his court under a tree and hand over possession. So when I saw this, I was fascinated and said, if this is state and this is the capacity of the state, and he being the personification of the state for me, I thought, what compassion, what empathy, what concern for the poor he has. My God, the government is very compassionate. See, we form opinions of the government based on the personalized interactions we have with the representatives of the state. That's the point I'm trying to make, and why it is important for us to understand this. I'll come to it later. So slowly, I understood that the state is not something out there in abstraction, but is a representation or aggregation of several individuals who represent the state, from whom we all benefit as citizens. So my understanding evolved, and then last year, when I was appointed as a member of the Human Resources, the Capacity Building Commission, under a fascinating program called Mission Karma Yogi, I was very inspired with what the Prime Minister keeps saying, and he told us when we all joined at that time. So I was inspired by the term Mission Karma Yogi itself. I was wondering, why is a government program called Mission Karma Yogi? What is so special? And how does it connect to state capacity? Because Karma Yoga for us is basically a chapter in the Bhagavad Gita. It is, to me, persons like me, it is either a commentary written by Swami, as part of the Bhagavad Gita by Swami Chinmayananda, or Swami Vivekananda's commentary or book on Karma Yoga itself. And that is all it meant. And suddenly connecting it to something intricately linked to state capacity was very fascinating. And so I wanted to give all this background because I want to talk about how this Mission Karma Yogi is intricately draws its inspiration and energy from the concept of Karma Yoga itself, and how important it is for the state to actually live this enormous message. And so as when the Prime Minister conceived it, I'm only drawing different statements that he has spoken of, either in his speeches or in his tweets or in his conversations with us. And so I'm connecting it to that. There are certain fundamental principles of Karma Yoga we need to understand. And I want to just put it out there. And whatever I'm sharing now is either from the work of Swami Vivekananda himself or from different speeches I would have heard either of Swami Chinmayananda or Swami Sarvapriyananda. It's a synthesis of all their thoughts. So I would not even be claiming that anything is original. It's definitely not. So understanding the Gita, I would always look at Karma Yoga and say, because that is something which resonated with me. And like Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, for each according to his own temperament. And for me, the work I started and the work I was doing, it was very easy to relate to just work. It was easy to relate for me to the karma part of the whole thing, but transcending or elevating my own work to a level of yoga is an evolution and it's work in progress, to be honest. But how did I see the Karma Yoga and what are the principles that are essential? I only talk about the principles of Karma Yoga as related to the state and its representative, the individual, the public servant. The very fundamental appreciation of Karma Yoga is about living that life in a sense, in the way Vivekananda wrote to the Mysore Maharaja, the vanities of life being transient, which means that entire illusion of life that we can call Maya, it's all transient. But he alone lives who lives for others, which means Vivekananda brings in it 2-3 concepts. One is the vibrancy of life itself and the fact that we live. But we just don't live, we live for others. He brings in the context of purpose of life also. But the purpose of life as connected to the other. And it's so powerful. He alone lives who lives for others. The rest are more dead than alive. So to me, Karma Yoga is a synthesis of some fascinating concepts where there's a tremendous agency of the I first, the individual, the human being. Because Karma Yoga is for whom? It's for us. And the state is also represented by the individual, the public servant. And so the agency of operating on behalf of the state is vested in the public servant. And for us, Karma Yoga is similar. You need to be alive and well to be implementing something. Forget the consequence of what you implement. That comes later. But first, we need to understand that I need to be a living being and I need to be a human and I need to be starting to do something. And I do it with the agency of I am doing it. Because in the government, if you don't have the agency of I am doing it, it's very difficult to work. We can all say you must be ego-free in your working, but I can be very honest. At least I have tried to be, but I could never be. And most government officials always get energy saying, "Nan marde, nan kaldaling No, during my times, it was like this. When I was DC, I could do all this. So I always watch these people and understand that embedded in their work was the agency of I am doing it. And I don't say right, wrong. I'm just saying these are these observations that I have made. And then as a government servant, when you are working, and when you talk to these people, you start recognizing that they take such pride in the good they bring about. Obviously, everybody wants to do good. And this mistaken notion that many of us have, which I also had for a long time before, several years ago, is that the stereotype about government being inefficient, mediocre, cannot deliver on anything. So I believe that's maybe relevant in some anecdotal examples, but as a generalizing it would be dangerous. It may not be appropriate or right. It's some saying that everybody is corrupt. It's not true at all. Neither is everybody honest, nor is everybody pure, nor is everybody impure. So I would say it is what it is. And in the way of going, the joy and pride they take that, I have traveled with people and when I'm talking to them, they say, oh, these houses, I've got them built. This road, during my time as Zilla Panchayat engineer, it was laid. And they actually take pride in, and there's nothing wrong in that. So they are actually looking at the consequences of that work they have done. Right, wrong is different. There is a consequence to what they have done. Sometimes, like in the Forest Act, the forest department evicted all the tribals from the forest. And I used to wonder, were they heartless? How can they remove people from the forest? It's a livelihood, life. They're just doing the act. How can you be implementing something? And when I talk to the officials, they would say, it's our job. We cannot be concerned about the right or wrong about it. It never struck me that it could be driven by a karma yogic thinking. They were just doing their job and there are consequences to it. And look at it. Whatever they decide to do, there's a choice for them. They can do it well, they can take money, they can become corrupt, or they can stay honest. They can come to office. Some of them just come to office and go back home. They live an existence of everyday life till they retire and go back. Nobody notices them. So they have a choice to be special or be ordinary. It's in their hands. So giving this choice, these are all messages you can draw from the Bhagavad Gita itself. Because the essence of Karma Yoga, without understanding the principle of life, agency, the consequences of what we are doing, and the moral dimensions of right and wrong action, the karma that can accrue to us, and finally, whatever we do, whether we do it or not do it, there is a result. Not doing is also some kind. I remember one of the former prime ministers, he used to be criticized in the papers as a man who's, revels in inaction, who never take a decision. So I feel sometimes inaction is also one kind of action. So these concepts I'm just saying because this is a foundational appreciation on which understanding of karma and karma yoga begins. And to me, for the state and public servant, it's an extraordinary privilege to start practicing karma yoga because he's embedded with all these things. He's has a life, he's living, he's been given the agency to represent the state. He's been given the responsibility of a position and asked to do some action. The action can either be done with the moral underpinning or an ethical basis. And there's going to be consequences of whatever he does on society, on people, on the nation itself. So he is ideally placed, in my opinion, to practice Karma Yoga, because Karma Yoga to me is this ability to purify oneself and one's mind as a beginning of the spiritual journey that each of us need to undertake in our lives to transcend the lives from where we are to where to go, and convert this action which is endowed with the responsibility for to deliver on something. But the way he delivers, the way he performs his action is the opportunity he gets to make it a yoga. So I felt this mission Karma Yogi is the proper term given to these individuals, these public servants, because they have been vested with that enormously privileged opportunity to transcend an everyday existence of just a job. And that's what the Prime Minister says it so beautifully. He says in his own way, he says, the responsibility of the Capacity Building Commission, which I belong to, is to move people from the mindset of a karmachari to a karma yogi. And look at how beautiful it is. If I consider myself, I'm working here, my purpose of my being in the government is to draw a salary, I may do a very good job. I may actually do what I'm supposed to do. I may come and do a perfect job and go back. But if my attitude and the purpose of my work is only to take a salary and perform for a salary, I'm nothing more than a karmachari. But taking the salary is not wrong. But the attitude with which I transcend this idea of just taking a salary and delivering on something for the salary, to understanding that my role is Niswartha Seva for my citizens, for my fellow citizens, and I do it, I become a Karma Yogi. And that is the principle in which state capacities now in India that we are looking to build. And look how powerful it can be. And again, to quote the Prime Minister, he says people should move away from a mere rule-based approach, rule-based thinking. Why I can do something, I cannot do something, where you're intensely caught in the trap of the I, to a role-based approach. My role is to serve my fellow citizens and enable them to improve. And therefore, transcending from a rule-based to a role-based approach itself is a journey of Karma Yoga for them. And what a powerful concept. So I realized only after listening to him that there is so much of thinking that he has put into enabling the state to possibly have a lived experience of Karma Yoga through its representatives, and therefore be a powerful agent of change for the nation itself. The third concept that I draw inspiration from the Karma Yoga is, if you look at the entire message, and if you look at the way the Gita unfolds itself, and look at the way Arjuna is that ever-willing, devoted learner, trying to learn, not that he understands and comprehends Krishna completely, but the sincere attempt to keep learning in every one of those 18 chapters is so powerful. And to me, embedded in this message is a spirit of lifelong learning, which never stops. And so, in Mission Karma Yogi that we talk about, the principles of everything I spoke about, along with the fact that you move from a rule-based to a role-based approach. You graduate from just thinking of salary and the purpose being limited to just my personal existence to something much larger of giving away your entire thinking, existence, and contributions to the welfare of society and its progress and progress of the nation. The Karmachari to Karma Yogi. And embarking on this lifelong journey of learning, where I constantly learn. That is sadhana. That is the sadhana Krishna talks about. The sadhana of converting karma and everyday work into Karma Yoga. It's so powerfully captured in everything. And that's what gives me energy every morning when I think of the job that I'm supposed to be doing today. So Karma Yoga is that opportunity for us to grow internally, to evolve internally, that inner journey of spiritual inquiry and discovery of the self, through outer manifestation of action, and in this case, an extraordinarily pure action of public service. And I felt that this is exactly what state capacity is. If we can enrich our people and their thinking with this capacity, if we can shift their mindset from being just a person concerned about himself, his family, his welfare, and his salary, to thinking about the role of building this nation in an unselfish way, that itself is giving the state enormous capacity. And then if you look at Krishna's concepts in Gita, and if you dive down deep, Karma Yoga is also giving you 100% to work. Your single-minded focus on what you're doing by living in the present is giving your 100% to what you want to do today. And to do that, you need to, giving 100% is not just a unified focus on what you're doing, but also our maximum ability, drawing upon all our inner competence, drawing on all our skill sets and contributing to change in a very deep way. And to me, that sense of complete ability, that sense of competence, that sense of that knowing my job and giving my full to that, giving 100% to that, is also part of building capacity of myself as an individual. And that capacity in an aggregated sense is state capacity. So I would like to just pause a little bit here and give a couple more concepts and possibly stop, and then you can have an interaction. I also realized something else. One of the strong messages that strikes me, and as I understand, I'm not saying, I'm sure there'll be different interpretations, but my limited understanding and my understanding of what the Gita is powerfully saying, and Vivekananda says it so beautifully, he says, intense activity amidst inactivity and inactivity amidst intense activity. And I think it's very contradictory. What could Swamiji have meant? What did he mean by this? It did not mean inaction. It meant when you're intensely active also, not being attached to it, and the mind being withdrawn from it is enormous inactivity. And even if you seem to be doing nothing, the intense way in which you're already acting, thinking about it, and the involvement that you have, that itself is something very powerful. And I felt that this is the enormous contribution that the message that we can draw from the Gita, which every public servant needs to have, because his life is just not doing what is expected of him alone. But if you are to really go deep into how the public servant operates, he needs enormous discipline to operate. And the state has to work with discipline. He has to be very dispassionate. He cannot favor people. I'm talking of the ideal public servant. He cannot resort to favoritism. The dispassion is the underlying message of Karma Yoga. He has to be completely detached from the fruits of his action. If every day morning, if he is operating thinking that by doing this, I'll achieve that. And if he does not achieve it, because the variables are so much in public work, and he'll feel so frustrated, he'll never be able to inspire himself to work tomorrow. The Sita Pragnati with which he has to operate is so critical to be a public servant. And when we talk of Karma Yoga embedding, being the foundational principle of Mission Karma Yogi of the Government of India, I believe this clarity in which he can work with discipline, the detachment that he's got by not attaching himself to the fruits of his actions, the principle of Karmanyavadikaraste, and the dispassion with which he operates. These are very, very powerful messages that will enable him to perform in a way in which it is at once elevating for him spiritually, but at the same time manifesting a social good on the outside. One last message that I would draw from Karma Yoga is in Karma Yoga, you constantly are trying to separate out the understanding of role from self. We all play different roles in society. I may be a father, I'm a son, I'm a husband, I'm a brother. I'm also working in government. I'm a government servant. I'm a boss to somebody. I'm a guide and mentor to somebody else. So many different roles we play. But who am I? This eternal question that Bhagwan Ramana asks us to constantly ask ourselves. This journey of discovering who am I through a detached appreciation of the work that I perform in the different roles that I belong to, without getting caught in those roles. All our problems start in life, all our desires that we suffer with, and all the challenges that we are all endowed with because we get attached to our roles, and the problem that comes because of that attachment. And learning to separate and keep the self and the role separate. Now, I might be the president of a country or an organization, but if I get sucked into being a president and start believing the self is also the president, I get into an endless problem. But if I can see myself separately, be an observer, like Ramana says, of my own self, see the roles I am playing, and appreciate that those roles I have to do because it's part of my duty, my karma, but not get attached by it. I would really be able to detach myself from the consequences that emerge from the actions I perform in those roles. What a powerful message of Karma Yoga that is. Today, people working in the government, if they really want to give their full 100%, if they really want to succeed in what they do, if they want to be a real change maker, a builder of this nation, and like Prime Minister says, be part of the team India which can build this new India. This should be the spirit. This spirit of Karma Yoga is what can take them. And I believe that that is how state capacity should be built. State capacity is not just at the individual level. We need to understand state capacity is also a set of processes that operates within the system. It is also why these rules get made and how it is implemented. It's also the individual, it's the institution, it is the larger construct for the state itself and its obligation. We need to see the state, in the way we describe it in social sciences. The state, by definition, by evolution of its role, is possibly the proponent of violence against citizens. Governance is a constant attempt to mitigate that violence, keep reducing it. A compassionate, empathetic state is one which is constantly enabling itself to reduce this act of violence on citizens. And to me, Karma Yoga enables that thinking. Karma Yoga gives that benefit of saying that how do I be compassionate yet detached? How do I give my 100% but still not think about the fruits of my action? How do I start transcending myself from just thinking about myself as an employee to seeing myself as part of a larger team working towards national resurgence without getting attached to it? And that is what is real state capacity getting built. That's what is an experiment that I'm very proud to say that our country is right now embarking on. There are 14 million or 4 crore public servants in this country across the state governments and including the government of India. Together, imagine if there are 4 crore Karma Yogis operating. There is nothing that can stop this country from becoming the Vishwa Guru. And that message of public administration, the spirit of Karma Yoga itself will be the message to the rest of the world. And imagine the powerful change humanity will be able to go through. So yoga, where we truly see it as a union, not just of the body and the mind, but something deeper, can also be seen as a union of the self, embedded into the larger context of the state, and discovering that oneness of actually the national progress along with your self progress, without that separation of identities, and that powerful belief that it can bring in bringing about change will be something remarkable. So I'm going to stop or pause here, and I'll be happy. Though what I might have spoken might have sounded a little abstract, for many of us today in what we are doing, every day is a lived experience and a great opportunity to be trying to make the system understand it, trying to make every ministry, every official, every person in the system understand this, and keep the focus on the citizen, keep it external. I exist for the citizen, and in like the language of the Honorable Prime Minister is bringing Jan Bhagidari, the partnership, that I'm not in isolation, but everything I do is for the citizen, for the other. So discovering the self and discovering the other, and the actions that binds the self to the other is Karma Yoga in action. And if you can live that without any attachment, I think the state will possibly be an extraordinary opportunity for sadhana for every one of us. And that's how I see building state capacity from the principles of Karma Yoga itself. So it is extraordinary privilege and a pleasure to be sharing these thoughts, especially in an institute where consciousness is something that all of you are constantly going deep into understanding. And I'm sure there will be a lot of lessons for many of us from your work, and a lot of lessons which we can take and embed into the way we are strengthening state capacity. So thank you once again, Dr. Ravindra and Dr. Binduji, for inviting me to share my thoughts. I'll be happy to respond to any questions that you might have.
Thank you, sir. It was very amazing listening to you, how the principles of Karma Yoga, it can be embedded in a larger section at the governance level. So even thinking in this line itself is a big paradigm shift of looking at what actually the governance is, and also this has given a new perspective that how actually the principles, say from Bhagavad Gita, can be translated right into the day-to-day working level at the system level. So no doubt that everybody we can practice at the individual level, but if it has to be translated right, to the system level, it has its own challenges. So with this, few things, now we'll open this particular session for the discussions or any questions or comments.
Sir, I wanted to ask you or discuss this aspect. The philosophy what you have conveyed is very great philosophy. That the transformation from a karmachari to a karma yogi. But now, if you look back and look at our system, the state system, like especially in the panchayat level, for example. If you can translate this philosophy into them, if you percolate this philosophy into at the panchayat level, definitely I think it will be possible for us to transform the attitude and but how do we implement that system in the current scenario?
It's a great question. Theory apart, philosophies apart. End of the day, it is proof of the pudding is in the eating. We need a practical approach to it. You can have Puranas and all the stories, but how do you live it? How does it become a lived experience? So we are looking at it in two ways. One is we have, and I'm bringing it to the language of the state. I'm now deconstructing it completely and taking away from the Karma Yoga, but the principles of that is there's a supply side of anything. We have to teach people and supply to them the ability and the capacity and give them whatever they require. And there's a demand side where you create the demand in the government officials and enable them to understand the gaps they have in their learning. And therefore they turn towards the supply side and saying, I'm hungry, give me something now. So we have to create the hunger. So how are we approaching it? Right now, what you're saying is absolutely true. At the micro level where it matters to citizens, it's the panchayat level, the corporation, urban local body level. That is where citizens' lives are touched. And the opportunities to serve are very high. At Government of India level, it's so far away. It may not be as close as what a citizen's life can be when it is on the ground. But we are started with the Government of India because that is where our maximum mandate and convening power lies. And what we are looking at is we go to the ministries. And because people are not interested in listening to Bhagavad Gita and Karma Yoga. That is a very subtle way of saying that you make your lives better. But what we try to start off is but most of them we realize want to do good. Unlike what everybody that tacitly inside them, they feel that I have to make a difference. Everybody wants a worthful cause in his life and he wants to make a difference and they feel happy. I remember one officer from the Consumer Affairs Department one day proudly told me, when Prime Minister simply suddenly announced that all BPL families across India, everybody who need to get ration free till November, he said, we did not know what to do, how to manage it. But then he said, when I started working on it, and a week or 10 days later, during COVID time, he went out and saw how people are benefiting by it. And he said, what I'm doing in the office is suddenly came to life in front of my eyes and how much people are benefiting and how it's helping them. It gave me great joy. And suddenly he could connect his existence to a role. My role is ensuring that the state is providing that for the citizen. It's not about I providing or I working. So I realize everybody wants to do that good. It's not as though he's not wanting to do that good. So we work with the ministries or departments as we call them. Understand what is the exist. Why do they exist? I always tell my colleagues, let's look at the counterfactual. Suppose we eliminate a ministry, what will happen to India? Suppose we eliminate government, what will happen to India? Suppose let's say there is no health ministry in Government of India. So the counterfactual is very troubling. Then only we realize how important it is to have that ministry. And then ask what is their role? How does it align to the national role that is set by the Prime Minister for the country? And then say, do I have the capacity to deliver on that? So what is missing? So we have broken down the capacity into 3 levels of competences. The first is the attitude of seva, the seva bhav that we want. That is the beginning of Karma Yoga. Because without seva bhav, you can't transcend karma to yoga. So we say, I want to serve is the first attitude, and that is a mindset. So we say behavioral competencies matter. And in the language of HR professional, I would say it's called behavioral competencies. But what is a behavioral competency for? It is to behave in a manner in which I can become a karma yogi from a karmachari. Then we say, let's say I am the joint secretary in government. That's a functional role. What are the functions of a joint secretary? How do I play those functions to the best of my ability? The 100% I can give to that. So what are the functional competencies I need? I acquire it to deliver on it for the sake of the citizen. And the third, let's say I'm joint secretary in the health ministry. Tomorrow I may go to education ministry, day after tomorrow I'll be in agriculture ministry. To do my job honestly and give 100% to citizens, I must learn as much as I can about health domain. Tomorrow I will go to education domain, I must learn that. That is a lifelong journey. That is the sadhana we are talking about. So my way of looking at it is I must have the behavioral competencies, I must have the functional competencies and the domain competencies, and acquire it completely, acquire it constantly to make things better. And only then I can start this journey of Karma Yoga. And at every level, it is like that. So once we map that for every individual in government, then we see do the institutions, are they capable of teaching others? So we are doing parallelly two things. On one side, we are assessing the need, outlining the demand. The other side, we're building the capacity of around 800 institutions meant for training in Government of India, giving the faculty the ability to think like this, to articulate like this, to understand and appreciate the concept that I spoke just now, and say, how do I enable that government official with the training capacity, training programs that I can generate for him to develop these capacities. So that is the way we're doing. The next thing we're doing is a person doesn't function in isolation. Person is part of a system, and the system has to enable him to think like this. So we're looking at process audits to understand the system, look at the processes, and create a facilitatory enabling environment in which he can thrive. So it doesn't have to be always, Karma Yoga is not always on the Kurukshetra. Every day is a Kurukshetra, I understand, but you don't have to create a Kurukshetra to understand Karma Yoga. So our jobs can itself be a great opportunity, and that's what we make it more and more easy to do. So all this is what Capacity Building Commission does to practicalize everything I say. Otherwise, everything I said is just theory, it's of no use to anybody. But how do you practicalize it? How do you package it in small capsules that people can swallow? If you overwhelm them with the fundamental philosophy that we want them to understand, we lose them. So we don't talk philosophy, because the talk today was on that I spoke. We only talk on what we need to do, and we are hoping as we engage with them, they appreciate the philosophy themselves, where Karma Yoga will become a lived experience for them. And then they'll become the true Karma Yogis, not because we told them, but because they realized it themselves. Any other questions from anybody else?
So the other aspect, probably whenever these new ideas are given for the people who have some bent of mind, is to have the resistance initially, because they have to unlearn their habitual way of thinking or habitual way of learning, and then acquire the new these things. So how actually this particular phase of resistance is really, handled?
I think any learning is always with resistance, right? If learning is smooth, it's not learning, it's just teaching. When we are in a kindergarten class or a first standard, second standard, we are taught, we don't learn. We don't see the distinction between the two. It's a hierarchical flow of information from what we call the known to the unknown. But as you grow older, especially as adults, you start discovering the act of learning itself. It's a very immersive process. So what we do is everything that we talk about, we have broken down learning into 3 levels. We say most of all the training programs, everything we do, 70% we say is experiential learning. You experience it in your workplace, and because Karma Yoga is an experience, it's not simply a intellectualization. Mere, like Vivekananda says, mere book knowledge, just repeating chemistry cannot make you a chemist. You'd actually go to the lab and work with the chemicals, only then you become a chemist. So we think 70% is experiential knowledge. 20% is what we call relational knowledge. satsang. You have to talk to people, understand from them, the fellow travelers in this journey, mentors, and start sharing it. And a lot of it comes from the 20% relational learning. Only 10% is informational learning. So that is the philosophy, the theory, and all that. So our entire training learning programs are broken down into this fundamental structure of 70-20-10, where the powerful, immersive, reflective experience is 70%. 20% is learning from the experience of people around you, the people who have traveled the journey a little more than you, and they share their experiences. And 10% is understanding what are the tools you have to travel this journey itself. And that's how we're doing it.
I often wonder, see, for example, we are all ordinary citizens, but we can transform to really wholesome citizens through this Karma Yoga. So the Karma Yoga help us to, discover us, also help us to manifest our virtues. That is something great about human being, I feel. Like you become, as you said, you become more compassionate and more altruistic and always try to help. So you see, that positive side of human is so great. And for that to explore or to manifest that, actually we need to, go through this Karma Yoga. We have to become Karma Yogis, actually. Otherwise, if we are within our shell and do our work, we will not explore ourselves, discover ourselves, and even experience those virtues. So that's the beauty of life.
There's a question on, I think from Amrit. The individual doesn't work in isolation. How do you equip an individual where the system and people around doesn't adopt the concept of Karma Yoga? Now, why should they? If you believe in something strong enough, you just live that life, and you discover that when you start living that life, you become a powerful influencer. Everybody has a circle of influence. The problem with us is we start off the journey with only hypothetical situations of why are you bothered whether others accept it or not? Every man's spiritual journey is personal. Others will travel with you, it is good. But why are you making your growth contingent to other people's growth? You just live that life. You just live that selfless service to society. And you'll soon realize that people around you are also changing. Our obsession with the rest of the world doesn't permit us to be obsessed with ourselves. We got to be obsessed with our growth. It looks selfish what I'm saying. Our evolution, and that will spill over. That powerful forces that you will develop will spill over on people around you, and they'll also join this journey. I think I would not worry about others. Like Gandhi said, I would like to be the change I want to see. And when you start off that way, let me live the message of Karma Yoga. Let me try. I'm not saying I can. All of us can only try. And our sadhana itself will influence people around us. And pretty soon, my personal experiences, they will not like to be left behind and they will join on this journey. That is how I would look at it. ಯಾವುದು ಇನ್ನು ಪ್ರಶ್ನೆಗಳಿಲ್ಲ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಪ್ರೋಷ ಮುಕ್ತಾಯ ಮಾಡಬಹುದು ಅನ್ಸುತ್ತಲ್ಲ ರವೀಂದ್ರ.
Right, sir. So if there are no any other questions or any other discussion, then I would like to take this an opportunity, sir, on the behalf of Center for Consciousness Studies and all the participants. So it was a very great listening to you, and I thank you very much for giving your valuable time for us, despite your being a very busy schedule. So you have given time for us, and you have enlightened and gave us a new perspective how actually these principles can be percolated down to the practical level, even at the system level also. So thank you, sir. Thank you very much. And I also thank all the participants for being the part of this webinar series. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Pleasure being with all of you. Namaste.